Welcome back to Second Breakfast and our ongoing book discussions, bringing you the best thoughts, theories, and literary analysis this side of Pan Am.
There you go. I was like, is he going to remember the name of the country?
I did my best.
So I read the new Hunger Games book, and we really wanted to talk about it. So this is our spoiler-free discussion of Sunrise on the Reaping. I want to mention that I say spoiler-free. If you've not for if you've read the Hunger Games,
it's
but
a prequel.
Everyone's read the Hunger Games, but I'm not going to spoil this actual book. But I'm really excited to talk about it because I was really excited when this book was announced and when it came out. I was a little cautious because I think I've said this on the show before. I hated The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes.
The book.
Yes, I didn't even bother with the movie. Did not like the book at all, and I was nervous, oh no, another prequel, I don't know, but
the original trilogy we both love.
Yes, so you figure out our ages, right? The Hunger Games was coming out when we were in middle and high school, so we were prime audience. I adored the books growing up, and I was really nervous but excited when this came out. And sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I love that first book so much. I think there are some decisions later in the series that I didn't love when I read it.
Yeah.
But the style that Suzanne Collins brought to that first book, especially hitting us at such formative ages,
right?
As someone who writes audio drama, as someone who's written scripts for comic books, I will always admire how propulsive her writing style is, where it feels like it moves at the same clip as something like a screenplay. I love reading the way she tells these stories. That first book, it's like water. It just moves through you so quick.
It's wonderful. And it's I have to credit her for she didn't invent a subgenre, but she kind of kickstarted this subgenre of YA dystopian fiction with this strong female protagonist and this revolutionary angle. That was a big deal, and that sort of changed YA forever, and Suzanne Collins is the pioneer of that. And yeah, that writing style is so
for our generation anyway.
Yes but that writing style is so perfectly matched to the style of this story and the kind of character that Katniss was. And I think one of the things that I struggled with in The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was that the character of, I hate even saying it, Coriolanus, Corio for short.
Is it because of the anus?
It's not because of the anus. He as a character was so disappointing, especially compared to such a strong character like Katniss, that I was nervous about it. But I mean, luckily, I already knew Haymitch was a great character, and it turns out he was very delightful to read here. So my sort of takeaway here before I get into it was my in this essay I will, is that this book was wonderfully rewarding as a Hunger Games fan. It's also incredibly unnecessary. This book doesn't really add a whole lot, but I also think that that's fine. And so I kind of want to talk about what really worked for me, what didn't work, and why things worked and didn't work, and then we'll kind of open it up for discussion.
That's great.
At the end.
I'm very curious about this because immediately off the bat, when you say it feels unnecessary, I had two reactions. One was, well, yeah, it's a prequel. So is it because it's the fifth book in a series, or is it distinctly because it's a prequel?
Well, it's neither. It's really just that it is not really adding much to the original idea or themes.
Okay.
The central themes of the Hunger Games are dealing with, a dystopian society, a overwhelmingly oppressive government, and how does that happen, and how do we push back against that and undo something like that. And I think also the themes that carry through as well are more interpersonal, and they're about trauma and how you recover from said trauma, and about how one of the things I found most interesting about the Hunger Games was the way that the Revolution and the way District 13 uses a lot of the same techniques as the Capitol in order to get done what they need to get done, and how Katniss is used as this pawn throughout the whole thing.
The way the Revolution curdles and falls apart to the point, I don't remember exactly where it happens in the series, but when you think Katniss is going to shoot Snow and she turns to the side and
she shoots
Julianne
Moore instead. President Coin.
Genuinely though, I think that really enhanced the analysis that was being done here, where it was, I mean, it's about the politics of revolution.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's like, I think pretty well done in that original series. And I found that this just didn't really do much else. It was a lot of confirming what we already know. But I want to talk about still what was rewarding about it. And then maybe I'll talk a little bit about some of the more negatives and what didn't work for me and what made it feel kind of unnecessary. But we'll get into it. So I kind of already hinted at this. I think the main thing that works well in this book is the character of Haymitch. He's a really good character. And we already know that from reading The Hunger Games. He's one of my favorite characters in that series. And I think Woody Harrelson plays him really well in the movies. He's one of the best parts of the movies. And so he was great because he's similar and different enough from Katniss that it worked really well. He's similar in that he's like very like harsh and, has a tough skin and he's stubborn, but he was also very smart, but not too smart. He wasn't like, overpowered. He wasn't a superhero, but he was like strong and capable, but also struggled a lot and second guessed himself a lot. And, has all these great relationships with his family and with this girlfriend of his named Lenore. And he's also like difficult and also, sympathetic all at the same time. And so, the entire time, just like in The Hunger Games, you're in his head, and so you're with him the entire way through.
First person.
Yes, it's that first person present tense that she does really well, and I know a lot of YA continues to do that today, and it's interesting. That kind of writing bugs me a lot, except here, but I think that's just like it's grandfathered in because I liked it when I was 14, and so I still like it now, but only with these books. But so
I'm always nervous when I give you something I've written that's in first person because I know you hate it.
And I'm like, ugh, but it worked really well, I think, for this. And again, compared to reading from Choreo in The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes for way too many pages.
You can't just nickname out the anus.
I didn't choose that. They chose that. You know why? Because even the characters in her own book were like, this is an absurd name. We're calling you Choreo. But I mean, in her defense, she named him before she decided to write this prequel.
Before President she said Snow. The name out loud?
Yeah, and then she was like, oh, fuck, what am I going to do now? But anyway, so like compared to Choreo, who was a dud, like I can't even get it. I'll get too mad. But like, if you're going to write a villain origin story, how is your villain not interesting to read? I don't understand how that happened. But anyway, so Haymitch as a main character, solid. Really enjoyed reading him. And again, his relationships with his family, his girlfriend, the other tributes, like that was all really, really great. I also got to say, one of my complaints about The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was that there were way too many character names. Like there are way too many capital people with names that don't make any sense. And they just kind of, your eyes glaze over. Here, Haymitch literally also can't remember other people's names. So it doesn't matter. It's so funny. Like he knows maybe 5 tributes names. Nobody else's names matter. Loved that for
feels
us.
A little meta.
I liked it. It was good. Well, because...
No, I just mean as a reaction to maybe if everyone else felt the way you did about the previous one.
Also because in Haymitch's Hunger Games, it's the second quarter quell. It's the 50th Hunger Games. And the special thing about that quarter quell is that there's twice as many tributes. So there are 48 tributes. So he's not going to know their names, and neither are we. At one point we get a list. We never return to the list. It's fabulous. But so I liked that a lot. The other thing that worked well for me, again, as a Hunger Games fan, was the connections to the other books. There were a lot of member berries, I gotta say, but like it was rewarding for me as a fan of this series. Like obviously we get to meet Haymitch himself and learn about him and his backstory, but like at one point, and what I liked about this is that it was sort of like unsaid. It wasn't like identified as this, but we saw Katniss's parents when they were young. We saw Peeta's dad at one point. We saw Plutarch Heavensbee. He's featured a lot in this series. That's
Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yes, yeah. So he's got a big role in this book, which was pretty cool to see. Of course, we see President Snow. We also see Caesar Flickerman. We see Effie Trinket come on later. So
but I don't know. I've kind of soured on this whole member berries thing because sometimes it's just continuity.
Well, right,
if it's a long-running series and it's a prequel, you want to touch on some of those relevant details. It's not always a cynical ploy. Sometimes it's just continuity.
And there were some things like we didn't really need to meet Effie when we did. We didn't really need to point out Peeta's dad, but like I was fine with it because it was like, oh, that's for me. Like I get it. I understand. You also have to constantly remind yourself, yes, a lot of the people reading this book are people our age, millennials who grew up with this series, but it's also still a YA book and it's written for teenagers. And so like the writing style and the sensibilities are going to be attuned to that age group.
It didn't feel like it was written for the people who were teenagers when the original ones came out.
I think it was a little bit of both, but I'm saying like you wouldn't be quite that obvious maybe in an adult fiction novel, but in a YA, like I understood it and it was fine.
Because we've talked about the Harry Potter books kind of growing up with the audience. Did this one feel like it was more targeted at the elder millennials?
Well, I don't know, because the books have always been very dark and adult in their themes and subject matter, and that was consistent here, and actually was maybe at some points less dark than others. Although at one point, this isn't a spoiler, but there is a decapitation at one point, so it does get
48 people to kill.
It does get pretty intense. So like I thought it was in line with the tone and sensibility of the rest of them.
Okay, cool.
I also, like, apart from the characters that we get to see, like our little, member berries there, we get lots of hints at the revolution to come. We see a bit of, okay, how do we get from this to where Katniss ends up and the players involved there. We learn the origin of the Mockingjay pin. So like that stuff is all fun. And I liked it and it was rewarding for me. And then there are also things that connect to the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes as well.
When was that in the timeline relative to this?
So the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is the 10th Hunger Games when Corio is 18. And this is the 50th Hunger Games, so it's 40 years after that. So we've got, so Katniss's Hunger Games is the 74th Hunger Games, so do the math there.
Okay, yeah.
So all within Corio's lifetime, but otherwise there's quite a big gap between each of these books. But so there were also hints at and nods to and references to that book as well. There were some references to the female main character in that story and some of the stuff with President Snow. I felt like if you haven't read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, you'll be totally fine reading this book, but it is rewarding if you have read it. So it's cool to be like, oh, okay, I see how those dots connect. So, that was fun. The other thing that I thought worked well here was the structure. I really liked the structure here. So the structure of this novel very much mirrors the structure of the first Hunger Games, where you open and it's Reaping Day and it's your main character and you learn about how they live, what illegal shit they do to survive. Katniss, it's hunting. Haymitch, it's making booze. You learn about, they both have this younger sibling that they adore. They've got a single parent. One of their parents is dead. And it's Reaping Day. And then, oh no, I'm going to the Hunger Games. And then they go on the train and they do all this. Like, it's the exact same structure as the first Hunger Games, which I think works really, really well. It's an effective structure. It was a little, I don't want to say boring, but it was a little disappointing that it didn't do anything beyond that structurally. But also it was like, yeah, I'm familiar with this. I know it works. That's great.
As someone who hasn't read Songbirds or Sunrise on the Reaping, I kind of like that similarity because it quietly fleshes out the relationship that Katniss and Haymitch develop so quickly in the original trilogy. So I kind of like that. I feel like that gives them sort of a kinship.
Yeah, and I also have to say the structure of Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is not like that at all. And I thought that book wandered quite a lot.
It was a longer book, wasn't it?
It was too long, and it takes place over a much longer period of time, and which is like fine. Like, I don't mind you deviating from your established structure, but I think is the same problem that Mockingjay had. When she doesn't have the games to anchor her, she kind of wanders. And in Mockingjay, there are no Hunger Games happening, and in Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, there are games in there, but a lot of other shit happens too. And so I think she's most successful in Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and this one where she's like got this like solid structure that she's following. So I thought it worked well here as it has in the past, and I really enjoyed it. The other thing that I thought worked well here was just like the story itself. Like, it's a good story. It helps you. I mean, Haymitch's story is incredibly tragic, as are all the stories of all these people.
Not a happy series.
No, not so much. And this movie, it made me fucking cry. Like, this book made me cry. Like, it was emotional and it was touching, and I thought that it helped me understand his character and understand his tragedy and his trauma and how he becomes the person that he is. So I thought that was effective, and I was impressed just with the pathos that this series has and continues to have, and especially, again, I maybe it's not fair, but I was constantly comparing to the other prequel because that's I think the best thing
I
to
think that's
compare
fair.
it to. And the moments that are meant to be really evocative and emotional in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I thought were kind of weird and cringy, and I wasn't like on board with, and I didn't feel that here. It is a pretty emotional book, and it's sometimes teetering on the edge of cheese, but I think when you've got it with this really great character of Haymitch, it worked totally fine.
And that's not unfamiliar for the genre.
Well, exactly, yeah. Like there's this wonderful, this isn't a spoiler, but his girlfriend's name is Lenore Dove, and she's named for Lenore for the poem The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. That's like the woman in the poem. And so there are a lot of ties to and references to and connections with The Raven, the poem, and so you get that a lot in the book. And I it's a little cringy to like have this teenage boy reciting The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, but like what else were you doing when you were 16? Like of course he's doing that, so I thought it worked just fine.
And her name wasn't Lily Bloom.
Well, that does help. God, let's not even get into that. Because the other thing is that there is quite a lot of singing in this book. There are a lot of songs, but there were way more in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and it was weird and didn't work at all. But I thought it worked much better here. So I feel like this was sort of a round 2 of the prequel to be like, let's try this, but do a better job. And I think she was successful here.
Is this a standalone novel?
Like, could you read it without reading the rest of the books?
No, like, is there going to be more of this story?
Oh no, it's very firmly wrapped up.
You think?
Yeah. Maybe this is a bit of a spoiler, but like, the book ends, and then there's an epilogue, and the epilogue is past Mockingjay.
Oh, okay.
So like, it's like, obviously things happen in between the end of Haymitch's games and Katniss's games, but it very much does not leave. It doesn't really leave room for more things to happen. This feels like, yeah, this is all there's going to be.
Because if it does seem more similar to the first Hunger Games book, I was wondering if you thought it might kick off another trilogy, or just structurally from a franchise perspective, where this is going. You have 3 books making up an original series, then a one-off prequel, then another one-off prequel.
So maybe there should be a third. Is that
do you make one more one-off prequel, and then it's... In my head, that makes more sense.
If you were going to do another prequel, I don't think it would be with Haymitch. I think it would be with a different protagonist, like Plutarch or something. Or maybe you talk about, like, the origins of District 13 or something.
Yeah.
I don't think you do more Haymitch. I think she's done what she's going to do with Haymitch. I don't see any more happening there.
Because you're saying that this exploration of the tragedies that formed Haymitch before, during, and after his... big Hunger Games gave you a fuller understanding of the character, but as someone who read the first 3 books a bunch of times and saw all the movies, I feel like I have a good enough understanding of that character, and I can fill in the gaps that I'm sure he had a tragic past.
Well, that's the thing. Like, so
I'm just teeing you up.
No, that's the thing, is that this book really does feel entirely unnecessary. Like, the stuff that I learned about Haymitch was certainly interesting, and it gave me a fuller understanding, but I already had a solid understanding of him because he's fleshed out so well in those original 3 books. And I was trying to remember, I was like, okay, how much of his games do we actually know from the original Hunger Games books? And as the games were unfolding, I was like, oh yeah, I remembered this part. I remembered this detail. But there were some other things that I couldn't remember if we already knew. But I was really finding that it didn't matter. Like,
okay, yeah.
Like, knowing specifically how certain people that he loved died, knowing specifically how he won his games, like, none of it was all that necessary. It was like, well, yeah, how else does he become this alcoholic loner? And how, of course he's going to be traumatized and sad. He won the Hunger Games at 16, like, duh, so I didn't find that it was really showing me anything that I did. It just more confirmed what I already knew or suspected about him, but also not just about Haymitch, but about the world in general, about Panem, about Panem's history, about the Hunger Games, about President Snow. Like, it didn't really complicate anybody or anything beyond what I already got from the original trilogy. I think maybe the exception is Plutarch. We get a lot of Plutarch, and if you remember from Mockingjay and stuff, Plutarch is working for the revolution. He's working for District 13. He works at the Capitol as a game maker, but he is like secretly behind the scenes orchestrating a revolution. the roots of that are here, and you see Plutarch sort of trying to do that. And so that was interesting to see, and it was cool to see Haymitch react to that and try to sort of be this this partner and this pawn for Plutarch. But that was maybe the one exception where things were complicated a bit there, but otherwise it was kind of just confirming what we already knew. It was like, yep, the capital sucks. Yep, everybody's used for the capital. There's propaganda. There's this cruel way that they utilize the tragedy of all the people in the districts for entertainment. Like, yep, that's all the same.
Because we've talked a lot in the difference between our weekly conversations about Game of Thrones and then the Patreon series we did about Fire and Blood, which is a prequel. Never mind that it's written as a history instead of a real-time narrative, but that is a history that gives you such valuable context about Westeros, about these different families and grudges and grievances and dragons and disasters. And I feel constantly now, as we've been moving through Game of Thrones, that Fire and Blood has paid dividends. Moments that I've seen and now understood from that history have greatly enhanced my experience, not just my understanding, but my experience of the original series. It sounds like this book hasn't given you any sort of additional understanding or experience with the larger franchise.
Yeah, not really. Because, I mean, honestly, as much as I didn't like The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I got more interesting and, like, I don't know, important lore from that book than I did from this one. And in this one, everything is presented in a better and more effective and, I think, more enjoyable to read way. But the lore about President Snow and his past and how the Hunger Games became what they are, that was still really interesting to me, even if the book itself I didn't think was very good. Here, I really didn't learn anything new. Like, obviously, like, a lot of the information and characters were new, but not in any way that enhanced my understanding of the rest of the story. I also felt like a lot of the connections to the stuff from the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, especially around President Snow particularly, the connections here felt a little bit forced or almost retcon-y. Like, there are some connections that Haymitch makes about President Snow that are connected to the stuff in that other prequel that I'm thinking, if he actually had found that out when he did, why didn't he tell Katniss about it? Like, it's stuff that's like, that should have come up in the Hunger Games trilogy and it didn't. And so that was kind of like annoying to read.
It's tricky when you move through the timeline.
Yeah. And so like, I totally see where she's coming from. And I'm like, I don't think, and what's frustrating is that he didn't, I'm trying not to spoil anything. That's why I'm being so vague. Basically, the girlfriend that Haymitch has here is a girl from District 12. He's dating her. He goes
Lily Bloom.
No, her name is Lenore Gray. And he goes to the Hunger Games and she obviously doesn't go with him, and they love each other and it's tragic. Woohoo. A very similar thing happens to President Snow in his book and Lucy Gray, the female protagonist from that book. And so there's a lovely mirroring there that I, as a reader, could identify on my own, but like Haymitch, for some reason, has to draw that connection himself. And I'm like, number one, why are you making that? Like, you don't need to make that connection because I already made it. And then number two, now that you've done it, why did you not bring up this very human part of President Snow with Katniss? Like, why aren't you talking about, hey, the reason he hates you so much is because you remind him of Lucy Gray?
Well, this is the temptation that, I mean, I've talked about this a lot. There's a temptation as a writer of you want the audience or the readers to draw certain connections.
Right.
And sometimes that means you give them some help and you have someone in the story draw the comparison.
Yes.
And that can spoil it.
But like a Covey girl from District 12 who likes to sing and is a free spirit, and you've got Lucy Gray and Lenore Dove, and it's spelled out in the book that these girls, these people, like these subset of people in District 12, their second name is a color. So they like very distinctly say, no, not Dove the bird, but Dove the color. And so like Lucy Gray, Lenore Dove, like obviously
you gotta just trust the audience.
Like, let us make that connection, Suzanne. Like, we are not dumb. And I know that I'm not necessarily the main audience for this. Like, I'm not 16, but I think a 16-year-old can make that connection on their own. And so it actually messes with the story and timeline and canon of it all to have him make that connection.
This is interesting because I wasn't expecting this book to feel like it was in conversation with Songbirds.
It really was.
Do you view it then as a companion to that prequel as much as it is a companion to the original trilogy?
I think so. I think it definitely bridges those two really, I think, pretty effectively. I think that if you're going to read this book, you don't have to have read the other prequel to get a lot out of this book and to understand everything, because everything's kind of spelled out. And there are a couple little Easter eggs that if you haven't read the book, you'll just miss it, and that's fine. But if you have, it's like, oh, I know what that is. Versus like you kind of have to have read the Hunger Games, at least the first one, to understand and enjoy this one, because this book doesn't go into detail about how Panem became what it was and what the Hunger Games are, and like it doesn't go into that because it doesn't need to, because it assumes you've already read it. But so it is definitely a companion to both, which I also wasn't necessarily expecting, but I guess makes a lot of sense. So like all in all, like it was, and also say some of like the structural choices, like I think in the original trilogy, Suzanne Collins is really successful at these like twists or cliffhangers or like things suddenly happening out of nowhere. And for me, that stuff, when that stuff would happen here, it wasn't very impactful, or it like ended up not mattering after one page. It was like, oh, just kidding, that's actually not what this is. And so I thought maybe they're less effective, or maybe I'm just older and I'm like harder to shock. I don't know.
Maybe, but you still want to be entertained.
Yeah, right.
You have that same hunger as a reader that you want every page to be interesting and explosive.
Yeah, so it was like, it felt like this was very much recycled Hunger Games, and it was rewarding and moving and emotional in many ways, but also didn't really add anything new and didn't really innovate in a genre that at this point feels a little bit tired. And that's not Suzanne Collins' fault. It's a compliment to her that so many people have copied her formula, and that this genre has really like lived its life. Again, this YA dystopian, revolution, female protagonist thing. That's great. So, but I was hopeful that maybe this might innovate upon that a bit more, and it didn't really.
If you're saying the genre feels tired and the genre feels like it's run its course, do you feel that way about the franchise?
At this point, yeah. Like I said, maybe they could do something about Plutarch or District 13, but it'd be like, okay, we get it.
So the experience of reading this was fun, but it didn't add much to the overall tapestry.
Correct. Yeah. I'm certainly glad I read it. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I read it in like 3 days, and I haven't read a book that quickly in a long time. So like that was I felt like I was 14 all over again. So like that was a nice feeling. And like I said, I cried. It was great. But also I was like, okay, I wanted a bit more out of that. But this is interesting to me, because then it got me thinking, like, just like of a larger discussion question of, does it matter that this book wasn't necessary? Does a book, like within a series, does a book or an entry have to feel necessary to be worth writing or sharing with an audience? Because in our last, you've been going through the Dune books. In the last discussion we had on Heretics of Dune, you said that was the least necessary book of the series so far.
But the most enthusiastic.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Where I felt like Frank Herbert was the most invested and excited about exploring these things that were very much on the margins of the original story. I'm not getting from you that Suzanne Collins seemed more excited about this than she did about Katniss.
No, I mean, she was clearly like, I'm very excited about Haymitch and fleshing out what actually happened during his games, and that was interesting, but I wasn't getting anything new.
Yeah, I struggle with that question of, is it worth writing? Because I'm a writer.
Like, so of course it
so
is.
I think, yes, if there's a compulsion or a curiosity there, then yeah, it's worth writing. It's a very different question if it's worth reading. And I think that's totally fair, because I'm thinking about all of these other... this is a legacy sequel, right? It's a prequel, but it's a late-term addition to an ongoing series that people feel comfortable in. It's familiar, and they just want to revisit.
Right.
Just to keep it to the Woody Harrelson of it all, it reminds me of the way people received Solo.
Oh, uh-huh.
Familiar, comforable,
Wars, yeah.
Didn't add anything, totally unnecessary.
Right, but I really enjoyed it.
I had a great time with that movie. I'm glad they made that. I'm glad they wrote it. I'm glad I paid to see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said this before, like, I hear a lot of critique of fan service, and I too have critiqued fan service things, but I've also said, I am a fan and I like to be serviced. So like, oh, sorry that I got to enjoy a book in a world that I love, you know? So like,
it's risky, I think, anytime you add to a long-running franchise, because at best, I think you can reassure me that I was right to love this thing, and at worst you can fuck up the original. So
yes,
like
and like that's what the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes almost does. Like
Yes,
it's in
yes.
danger of like ruining the series, and that was so disappointing.
Yeah, and I think you and I talk about that pretty often as fans of the horror genre. There are plenty of legacy sequels where like none of the Saw sequels after the original 7 improve upon the franchise.
Certainly not.
Some of them threaten to fuck it up.
Yep, they really do.
But I don't know. I'm thinking of something like Alien, which is unique and has been around for a long time. And every time there's a new Alien, I'm excited because, hey, I'd like to be in that world for another 2 hours. Sometimes it makes me think. Sometimes it's just sort of there.
Yeah.
Romulus was very good, but it didn't... Did it add much to the world? No.
Right.
Not really. It wasn't necessary, but hey, I had a great time with it.
Yeah.
And we're getting into that kind of the best you can get as a shrug territory for long-running series.
Because that's
Sorry.
that's okay.
I'm still sick. I think
So am I.
I kind of think that's okay, though.
Sure, because that's where we start to get into like Fantastic Beasts and like what is that really
Yes.
adding to Harry Potter? Not a whole lot.
But it doesn't fuck it up. Cursed
Right.
Child did.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Cursed Child sounds like more of a Songbirds thing.
Yes.
This sounds like more of a Fantastic Beasts.
And I think that Sunrise on the Reaping was better than a lot of the Fantastic Beasts movies.
Okay.
I mean, I'll defend the Fantastic Beasts movies till I die. I enjoy them immensely. I appreciate what they're trying to do. I love that they exist. I think it's very fun. The characters are good. The execution on the films themselves is a little rough, but and it's frustrating that they haven't been able to like do what they really wanted to do with them. But yeah, it's like, oh no, I have to go to the Wizarding World again. What a shame, you know? Like, of course it's not going to be as good as the original story. Like Suzanne Collins is not going to top the Hunger Games. Like she's just not. Like she might write a whole different series and she could do better there. But in terms of like being in this world, Katniss is the best character. Her story is the best story. And that's just the way it's going to be.
So that framing sequence where we get a little bit after Mockingjay, do you think she's laying any sort of breadcrumbs or track there?
No, she was very much tying it all up. She was very much like closing it. That's how I read it, at least. Other people who read mine feel free to disagree, but I felt like she was like, yep, I have covered all of my bases and now the story has ended.
So basically upon announcing this book, they also announced that they were going to adapt it into a movie. I believe it's still Francis Lawrence directing, who's done most? Not all, I don't think, but most.
I think the first movie had a different director, but I think he might have done all the other ones.
I think he did the rest of them.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the continuity there.
Yeah.
Are you looking forward to this film?
Yes, I am. I really am. Because I didn't see the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes movie because I hated the book so much. And because of all the singing, I was like, I don't know if I can handle it. I have listened to the soundtrack quite a lot. And some of the songs are lovely. Most of them are a little too folksy for me. But actually knowing the songs was helpful because some of the songs do reappear in this book. So I had a tune to go with them. So that was actually kind of cool. And she like acknowledges that in her acknowledgement section of, you know, Howard Shore wrote the music for this and blah, blah, blah. So that's cool. But where was I going? Oh, so I didn't see that movie. But I would be excited to see this one.
How much of that is dependent on who they cast as young Woody Harrelson?
Well, that's going to be tough. I mean, I'm going to see it no matter what. You know what would be great, Cam, is if Woody Harrelson was narrating it. Or like if he at least did the epilogue. Because again, the epilogue is from Haymitch as an adult post Mockingjay. So they've got to have him narrate at some point. I think that could be really cool. Actually, that'd be fucking awesome because he's got a great voice too. But yeah, who are they going to cast? I don't know who they're going to cast.
Tricky.
That is tricky because those are big shoes to fill. So that'll be interesting to see. But I mean, and also like there are other really great characters in this book too. Like, spoiler, they all die because they're the other tributes and they all die, but they're really great characters. And I think again that was like a flaw of the other prequel, which I don't like saying the title because it's too long, so that's why I keep saying the other prequel. It's a mouthful. But like there were like no good characters in that. Like there's maybe one good character in that book. This one was full of great characters, so I'm excited to see them all come on screen.
Off the top of your head, can you think of any prequels that fully enhance and improve upon the original story? Because I can't think of anything
No.
besides Red Dead Redemption 2.
Oh, okay. No, because you can't even count The Hobbit, because The Hobbit was written before The Lord of the Rings, and The Hobbit movies are not as good as Lord of the Rings movies, so there's even that. I can't think of anything. No.
Because
No.
I feel like this has been the last 10 or 15 years. Everything has gotten a prequel.
Yeah, right, because we can't come up with a new story, so we have to dive into an old one.
But we never like them.
Right.
And I don't mean us.
just
We
anybody.
like, I don't know, half of them. But I mean,
Right.
as a society, there is this growing impatience.
Right. Yeah. People, we want new things now. Like, give us and don't give me like another Hunger Games. Give me another story that's different from the Hunger Games.
There's something specifically about prequels that I think it's leading to this diminishing returns. Whether it's House of the Dragon or Fantastic Beasts or Rings of Power, or I'm thinking of these big IP prequels. And I think there's a real frustration with it unless you have something like Better Call Saul, where you have so much of the canvas left to explore, so many different characters to dig into. It's when you're within the tight constraints of an IP sandbox that prequels end up feeling kind of toothless and cookie cutter, where sure, it was okay, but it was kind of just the other thing retreaded again
and not as good,
and it didn't add much to the experience. Because you seem kind of frustrated in this experience.
I am, because I was really hopeful, because I knew Haymitch was such a strong character, and I knew a little bit about his games, but not a lot, and I was excited that it wasn't going to star Coriolanus, and so I was like looking forward to it, and then it was just all right. But I guess that's a lot better than my experience was with the other prequel. So I don't know. And again, I had to go to Pan Am and read about the Hunger Games and, feel deeply moved by a story. Like, that was still a great experience.
Question for the audience, though, as we wrap up here. Are there any prequels that you think enhance the original?
Yes, I would love to hear about that. Or again, if you read this book and you thought, actually, no, I thought it added all kinds of things. What did it add? I would love to hear that perspective, because in this conversation, I'm the only one who read this book. So I'd love to hear more. I don't know anybody else in my life who's read it yet. So I would love to engage more.
Despite it selling millions of copies.
Yeah, right.
Good job, Suzanne Collins.
Way to go, Susie. So yeah, thank you all so much for listening. If you'd like to check out our Dune episodes, as we've been hinting at, you can. We've got a playlist over on YouTube, or you can just search within whatever platform you're on, and you'll find them. And
much like Woody Harrelson's doomed relationship with what's her name?
Lenore Dove.
Lily Bloom. We did an episode over on Patreon about doomed romances past Sunday.
Yeah.
And that was it was kind of a roundup discussion about Anna Karenina, Marie Antoinette, Vertigo, and Phantom Thread.
That was a fun discussion. Yeah. So go check that out, because it's on our Patreon. You can join the Patreon. It's $2 a month. For that low price, you can of course support the show and get access to our bonus episodes. We put out 1, 2, 3, 4 bonus episodes every month. It varies.
Suzanne Collins may have sold millions of copies of this book. You know what book hasn't sold millions of copies?
But could, if you buy it right now. Lemon Tarts in Space. That is Cam's latest book, as Cam hinted on the episode. He is a writer himself. This is his latest book. It is a light sci-fi dark comedy. Think of it as Ridley Scott's Alien meets Monty Python. It is so much fun, incredibly funny, incredibly moving. You can read it as a regular novel in paperback or e-book form, or you can listen to the fully produced audio drama if you haven't gotten enough of Cam's dulcet tones. He does star in the audio drama, as does our good friend and friend of the show, Tristan. You can check that out in the link down below. Thank you very much for your support. And anyway, thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll catch you here on Friday with another brand new episode.